Teen Titans aired from 2003 to 2006 and lasted for 5 seasons, 65 episodes, and a movie. In this video, since I've already reviewed every single episode, I'm going to do a series overview. I'll do top 7 and bottom 7 episodes, rank the seasons, and then give the show a score. Also, real quick, since this will be my last Teen Titans review, I've put a poll in the description to vote on what show I'll review next. Well, since we have a lot of ground to cover, let's go ahead and begin with the 7 worst episodes of the show. Starting at number 7 is Every Dog Has His Day. This episode comes after 3 great episodes, and that only makes it seem worse in comparison. With long segments, weird Beast Boy moments, and pervert dog, the only reason it isn't lower is because the fight at the end is somewhat decent. At number 6, we have another Beast Boy episode with Deep Six. This episode is the only season 1 episode on the list, and it's here because of how frustrating Beast Boy and Aqualad are. Later in the series, they are much more enjoyable, but it's hard to stay on them for the nearly 22 minutes they are fighting. At number 5, we have the most boring episode of the series, Overdrive. With every other episode, there's something to remember, some character or moment, good or bad. But here, the only somewhat interesting thing would have been the last fight, but they kind of fumbled that at the end. However, unlike the last 4 episodes on this list, it didn't hurt any other episodes of the series. Numbers 4 and 3 are kind of a combo, so I'll talk about them both at the same time. Homecoming Part 2 and Homecoming Part 1, respectively. Both of these episodes are such a terrible setup to the season arc that it can be argued that they single-handedly ruin it. They mishandle the Doom Patrol to a point of frustration. The fight in the latter half does give it a slight edge, but both episodes are still terrible. At number 2, we have Titans East Part 1. Unlike the last 2-parter on the list, it's only Part 1, but still, being the only 1 out of 5 it gave to part of a season finale, it had to be here. It single-handedly permanently ruined Brother Blood, made Cyborg act uncharacteristically, and had some of the lamest fights of the show. A terrible beginning to the end of the worst arc of the series. Finally, the worst episode is Fractured. This episode is nearly unbearable. The jokes are unfunny, the characters are almost different people, the action is non-existent, and Larry is arguably one of the worst things to come out of this show. This episode is the opposite of everything that makes Teen Titans good, and that's why it's at the bottom of this list. Well, that was a bit of a bummer. Now let's move on to the more positive but hard to make list, the top 7 best episodes of Teen Titans. Number 7 is The Beast Within. Generally, Beast Boy episodes without terror are comedy-based, and while this is fine, generally the jokes within these episodes are mostly basic humor. However, this episode is one of the darkest of the series, both in its content and presentation. While the teen's treatment of Beast Boy and the ending were a bit lacking, the Raven and Beast Boy conversations were great, along with the interrogation and the incredible fights. Number 6 is the closer to Season 1, Apprentice Part 2. Generally, as you will see more of with this list, Teen Titans usually manages to nail their season finales all the way back to Season 1. This episode is one of Slade's best, along with having some fantastic fights and the conclusion to Robin's arc. Robin's arc is the shortest of the show, only having 3 full episodes focused on it in this season. But besides the slightly convoluted ending, the dialogue and action carries this episode onto this list. Number 5 continues the trend of season finales with The End Part 3. While Part 2 might have had more going on, Part 3 uses those plots in order to make what could have, and arguably should have, been the series finale. This episode revolves around Raven's series-long arc started at Nevermore, and has Trigon and Slade to make for some great fights. The End Part 3 is the best episode of the best arc of the series, and has enough action to get away with a Deus Ex Machina at the end. At number 4 is Aftershock Part 1. While I did enjoy the second half of Part 2, the entirety of Part 1 is great. While Terra's betrayal did come 2 episodes before, this episode shows the effect of such, as Terra takes down each Titan. While Beast Boy, Cyborgs, and Star's fights were all pretty brisk, Terra's fight with both Raven and Robin make this episode one of the best of the series. Number 3 breaks the trend of finale with X. This episode starts with 3 of the best scenes of the show. Especially, the first fight against Red X is fantastic. It's definitely one of, if not my favorite fight of the series. The music and one-liners from X being immediately juxtaposed by Robin's moody monologue is great, and the rest of the episode barely falters. Fantastic episode, which shows the lengths that Slade drove Robin to. Number 2 is the series finale, Things Change. While I know this is an incredibly unpopular opinion, I honestly love how the series ended. Not with a huge fight or a silly chase scene, but with the Titans accepting that things will never be how they were. The last scene of this episode is one of my favorite scenes of not just the show, but of anything, and because of that, despite the slow beginning and mediocre fight with the other Titans, it's my second favorite episode. Number 1 is fairly easy to guess, but it's Haunted. All 3 of my favorite episodes are callbacks to an arc from a different season, and this episode does it the best. While it doesn't quite hit the highs of some of the other episodes, there's not just a single mediocre or even just good scene in this entire episode. It is 22 minutes of fantastic writing. From the best visuals of the show, to Star and Robin's fight, to the fantastic action and dialogue between fights, to the visual hints of the twist, to the hints of Robin's past, this episode is fantastic, and is truly Teen Titans at its best. Alright, with those lists out of the way, let's get to the season rankings. This list was pretty difficult, as many of the seasons feel very similar in quality. Before getting into the ranking of the seasons, I didn't really know where to mention the movie, so I'll mention it here. It's relatively decent. It's not quite as serious as I would have liked it to be, but the few decent action scenes and the wrapping up of Star and Robin's story makes it a worthy addition to the series. Anyway, into the actual seasons. My least favorite season was season 3. Don't get me wrong, this season isn't completely garbage or anything, as it was the only season to have 3 episodes in my top 7 while the rest only had 1. The problem is, besides those 3 episodes, the rest range from average to completely terrible. But the real reason it's at the bottom of the list is that the main storyline is easily the worst. While other seasons might have had bad episodes in their storyline, this season didn't have a single good one in Cyborg's arc. While 3 fantastic episodes, including 2 of the top 3, make it more than tolerable, season 3 is overall the weakest of the series, although it's very similar in quality to the next 3 on the list. Next on the list is season 5. This season really only has 1 or 2 terrible episodes. The problem is, besides Go, Things Change, and the second part of the finale, there really isn't another standout episode. While every episode practically being part of the story arc had great potential, they really don't capitalize on it. Still, Things Change in the latter half of the season arc is enough to keep it above season 3 with a consistent, decent quality. And number 3 is the first season. This season definitely feels like the first, and episodes like Deep Six and Thunder and Lightning definitely show the writers trying to figure out how to write teenagers as heroes. Luckily, these are balanced out by Nevermore and Switched, which are both episodes that are heavily character-focused, something I wish they revisited more later in the series. To top off the season with Mad Mod and 3 fantastic main arc episodes, this season definitely set the standard for the show. The runner-up is Season 2. This season opens up with a fantastic episode that is arguably the most unique of the series. While I think that shaking things up this early with the new Titan was a bit strange, the decision to not have Tara at any non-arc episode, besides the cameo Winner Take All, to be disappointing, her inclusion in the season is fantastic. While the first few episodes of her arc are a bit rough, I believe the ending to this arc is easily the best. While the first 10 minutes of part 2 were a bit bland, the last 10 minutes of this season is arguably the best 10-minute stretch of the series. Fantastic season with a few great standalone episodes along with the second best arc of the series. Obviously, the only season to get an 8 out of 10 is number 1, Season 4. This season is filled with great episodes, both ones that are episodic and arc-related. Episode 257494 is one of, if not the best comedic episode of the series. The Quest is a great episode, and I even enjoyed Employee of the Month. But all of that gets overshadowed by the best arc of the series. While other arcs had their highs and lows or were cut short, this season was made up of 5 consistently great episodes. Moments like Slade's return and his team up with Robin make this season stand out from the rest as my favorite season of the show. Before I get to giving the entire show a score, I'll quickly summarize my thoughts on the show. Obviously, after talking about the show on the internet for nearly 3 hours, it's hard to come up with more things to say, but Teen Titans is a type of show that can never exist today. The dark tones and heavy action just isn't seen in modern kid shows. Still, nearly 20 years later, the show still holds up. While it's not consistently hilarious and doesn't always have the most deep of stories, there's nothing for everyone to like in Teen Titans. The characters, however, are easily the highlight of the show, with Robin, Raven, Tara, and on occasion Beast Boy easily carrying entire arcs, and they make for the best moments of the show. Well, I think it's finally time to wrap up the series. Predictably, since 4 seasons got a 7, I'll be giving the show as a whole a 7 as well. While the show isn't just the average of its parts, the show keeps its stories relatively within each season, so it's hard to give it anything higher. Anyway, unless they announce a new season of the show, and I wouldn't get my hopes up, this is likely the last time I'll talk about the show at this length. As I mentioned, there is a straw poll in the description to vote on what I talk about next, although I probably won't do 6 videos in a row on the same show again. Anyway, this is Mabel Samuel, and I'll see you in hopefully only a few weeks. Thanks for watching.